Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 132. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest, also named Joe in the great state of New Jersey, Joe Sullivan. What's up, man?
Hey, how are we, man? I'm just hanging out.
I'm so excited for this, man. You have no idea. I was trying to think before we hit record when we first met, and it's got to be probably at the garage gym a couple years ago, maybe one and a half years ago in person, right?
Yeah, spot on. Like, I think it was also like in passing the first time too.
It was.
Yeah, I think you were home for like a short trip.
Yeah. And the one thing that I remember about the first time we met, now it's coming back to me. I was not 100% sure if it was you or someone else who I knew through social media. And so I think I didn't interact with you too much on purpose because I wasn't sure if your name was Joe or not. But then we met again in person at the garage gym. You came down to Philly for the Project Endure event. And it's been a lot of fun watching your journey. And so before we get too far into anything, I would love for you to just introduce yourself to the audience however you want.
Yeah, I mean, I try to keep it super short and simple. I've never been accused of not being long-winded, so fair warning on that one. But I'm Joe. I'm a coach, and that's pretty much it, to be honest with you. I know to keep it super short and simple, but I'm gonna try to keep it that way all night.
That was the shortest, most concise intro that anybody's ever given me. All right. So I'm going to dig in with a few questions here. You've got a ton of tattoos that I love. There's one in particular that I'm picturing in my head at this moment. What is your favorite tattoo that you have?
To be honest, it definitely is the shark bite on my knee, the shark jaws. But I
Mhm.
don't know if that's the one you were thinking of or not, but that's definitely my favorite now.
It was, and I want to know what it represents to you and when you got it.
I got it at some point this year, maybe April, the spring of this year. I'm not entirely sure of the date. I've gotten a few this year, so I've got them kind of blended. But I got ACL surgery, ACL, MCL, and both meniscus surgery way back when I was playing college lacrosse. And during that time, I was also an athletic training student, so I had a lot of internships. I was able to relate to a lot of people, and especially some of the younger high school kids that would unfortunately have this as well. I would like jokingly say like, "Yeah, you want to see my shark bite?" And they would just be like, "What?" And like that's just what it became. So like from there, it's always been like, how can I like highlight my knee in any sort of way? And then why not just get shark jaws on my shark bite?
That's beautiful, man. Now, was that a painful tattoo?
Yeah, with the majority of it being bone. Yeah,
Yeah. What's your first tattoo ever?
it's actually the one on my thigh. It's a giant hourglass. Actually, our wonderful friend Paloma did it. It's got a tree in the top and an actual like the anatomical heart on the bottom. And I actually saw this when I was working in Philly. I saw it wasn't like graffiti, but someone like threw up a sticker during the pandemic when like everything had plywood up, everything was like Center City was like a ghost town. It was super freaky. And it says, "I might be bleeding, but I'm still breathing." And it's always about like, you know what I mean? Like shit gets hard, but like we just got to keep on pushing through, as I'm sure you know.
I do know, and I love the symbolism there. And so, all right, we're gonna dig into a lot here, but let's go back to childhood, Joe. Where did you grow up? What was childhood like for you?
Childhood was I don't want to say stereotypical suburbs, but like we were blue collar town, right? I lived in Edison, New Jersey growing up. Mom worked in the school kitchen. Dad worked all the damn time, right? So like he worked up in Port Newark, not super important, but he was gone. Like I woke up, he was already gone. I was like eating dinner, getting ready for bed. Dad came home, right? Like he was working his ass off, trying to, provide for all the peoples. Sister and I grew up in like rec sports and things until I found lacrosse, and then I stuck with lacrosse for like ever.
Mm.
Um, really, that was really pretty much sums it up. Like if I wasn't playing lacrosse, I was playing in some sort of like rec league lacrosse or doing some sort of like weight training once I hit like middle school and like high school. And then that was really about it. Like dad worked all the time. He'd always make it a point to like see all my games, take me to my tournaments and stuff. And like mom was really there to like help with the day to day, right? Like homework, food, rides from there and forth from practice, games, yada, yada, yada.
Mhm.
But
Are
probably also on that, sorry, probably the best thing though, growing up, like I had my grandparents living with us. They moved in, I think it was like elementary school or middle school, like right in the transitional years. So like it was super at the time, I didn't really see this, but like now I see it was like super cool to be able to actually have that extra set of like, yes, they were fun grandparents. They always tried to like spoil you, but like that extra set of like guidance and perspective. And again, seeing that now is a lot more impactful than during that like growing up phase.
I think that's how a lot of our childhoods were, where we learned things and we took things for granted that maybe we didn't fully recognize until long after we weren't children anymore. And our childhoods were similar in the fact that our moms were there to, get us from school to sports and, make us dinner and, help
Oh
us with
yeah.
those things. And our dads were out working hard, long hours to provide. And I'm wondering what your take is looking back on your childhood and if you absorb some of that work ethic from your dad, because I know how hard you work.
I mean, tremendously. It's actually something I've prided myself probably since like college, since my long days really started. And in interviews or like times where I had to write papers, like I've definitely referred to my dad's work ethic. Because again, like if I saw my dad, other than sometimes games and practices, but like on a normal day to day, if I saw my dad for like a half hour before I would go to bed, like that's would sometimes be like a lot. So like to me, I'd always have early morning classes when I was in school, or like now, like we're up at 3 o'clock and we're at the gym working out before our first 5 a.m. client. And like I'm not done with my clients until like 7:30 at night sometimes. So it's like part of the grind. You got to just put it in now and then hopefully it'll reap out later, right? That's always the goal. But my dad always said too, like when because I was getting a lot of trouble when I was a kid in school. I was a little bit of a
No.
knucklehead. Yeah. So he always told me that you're when you're at some place, you're there to do that job. Like so like when I'm at school, I'm there to learn. I'm not there to like goof off. Like I'm there for work. Right. So
Mhm.
like when you get to wherever you need to, like that's what you're supposed to do. Like when you're going to practice, that's also like my job. You're there to learn, you're there to work. When you go to the game, that's where it's like that's when you're having fun and that's where you need to excel. And he always said, because again, I was always getting in trouble. He was always saying, "You're in school to learn, and no one likes the class clown." And I've kind of taken that now and said, like, I tried to flip it on its head to where how can I be the class clown to make
Mm.
everyone's life or their time or whoever I'm impacting a little bit lighter while
Mm.
also, again, putting in that work.
It's so interesting. I was at the Atlantic City Marathon yesterday watching my brother run his first marathon. And I grew up as the serious kid. I was always the kid who sat in the front of the class, got good grades, worked really hard, didn't laugh a whole lot. And my mom always used to ask me as a kid why I enjoyed suffering so much. And it was just, I was a serious kid, right? I got up early. In a lot of ways, I'm the same person I was back then, but there's part of me as an adult that has found a lot of joy in making other people smile, in finding humor in situations. And at the marathon yesterday, I was at the 1 mile marker holding up a big sign that said, "You are not almost there." And
It was great.
it was so much fun, right? Like 99 out of every 100 people found that so funny, and you see people smiling and laughing, and it's a great feeling to make people feel that way. And I wasn't always like that, but it sounds like you always were, and you embrace that now. What does that look like on a day to day? How do you show up as the quote unquote class clown in what you do?
Dude, I mean, well, one of the previous facilities I worked at, their phrase was, "We never take ourselves seriously, but we take our craft seriously." And like to me, that was like that's always stuck. Like I've never phrased it that way until like they said it. And then like when they did, it was like, oh, they just hit the nail on the head. Like I still say that day to day, like now. Like if you were to walk in the garage, and I mean probably when we first met too, like I am shoeless, I am shirtless, I'm just in shorts, just like making people laugh, hanging out, and just like again, just making sure people are having fun in a space while obviously trying to get better. But that's pretty much about it. Like I don't try to take any serious situation that seriously, unless I have to, right? Like time and place. But for the majority of the time, I'm always trying to keep everything on a positive note, not necessarily in like that toxic positivity way, like everything's all right, but more of like a it is what it is. Let's bounce and flow and go from there.
Mm. So take your craft seriously, but don't take yourself so seriously. Do you think that would be possible if you weren't very honed in on your craft? So if you weren't as good of a trainer and as a fitness professional, would you be able to be so loose otherwise? Or do you need to be so good, so focused, so honed in on what your job is to allow yourself to be relaxed and loose and fun?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like everything is contextual, right? But I feel like it depends on that hour. So
Mm.
to be, I guess, more specific with my answers, like if I'm with a new client for the first time, like, yes, I'm still cracking jokes. I have my routine of jokes. None of them are new. I know when to say them. I know the little things to like make the session a little bit easier. But at that point, that's where like I'm there to make sure that they know they're comfortable, but I'm making sure that there's progress and a rationale behind everything they're doing. So it's like I'm educating yet making it fun and lighthearted. And then when it's someone like I've had for 2 years. They're in, like, the last week of their phase, and it's you know what I mean? Like, that's where you can just talk about, like, "Yo, what'd you do this weekend? How was camping? How was the football game? Did we get loaded at the Giants game last night? What were we drinking?" Like, like, things along those lines, and then on the other side, for me to actually be able to make that happen, like, I always pride myself in still being a student. So, like, for example, like, today I was on a Zoom call for 2 hours going through, like, High Rocks coaching certification process, right? Like, to me, if I don't want to say put letters after my name, but if I don't like learn something at least every quarter, I feel like I'm missing out on something, right? Like, is there's some sort of perspective I can gain, a lens I can get, even if it's one thing out of a whole weekend course of some kind, like that's still super beneficial to
Mm.
allow me to then change something which I'm doing or improve something which I'm doing. So I guess the learning side of my craft I take really, really seriously so that I can hopefully apply that to then make the programming seriously, or the session itself and the experience not so serious.
Mm.
I hope that makes sense.
It made perfect sense. So I have a quote and then a phrase. So the quote is from Albert Einstein, who said, "Creativity is intelligence having fun." And I think for the context of what we're talking about, intelligence can be swapped out with just being really skilled and good at what you do. And when that's the case, you can have fun with it. And there's another phrase, I don't know where this came from or who said it, but it takes hard work to make it look easy. And I think it would be easy for someone to walk into the gym, watch you cracking jokes, shoeless, shirtless, and just make the assumption this guy's a goofball. Maybe he doesn't know what he's doing. And in reality, it's the complete opposite. You've worked so hard at getting so good at what you do that you are allowed to have fun because you're so honed in on what you're doing. And I think that's important to point out.
Thank you. Yeah, I try and I hopefully make it seem that way, right? Like I try not to talk out of my ass all the time.
Yeah, and I just think it goes, this could be applicable to anybody listening because if you are showing up and feeling like an imposter every single day and not putting in the work and not sure about what you're doing, it's going to be hard to be loose and to have fun and to make people laugh. But if you are showing up and you are sure of yourself in the preparation you've put in, it'll be a little bit easier to not take yourself so seriously because you are so confident in what you do and how you do it. So just want to throw that out there. And with that being said, Joe, we'll get into some of the deep stuff. When you look back at your life to this point, I'm curious, what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle? So, a circumstance that you didn't get to choose for yourself.
Oh, that one's a hard one. Now, are we talking more like I guess we're talking all forms of life, right? Like it
Mhm.
doesn't matter what scenario it is. Probably So my grandparents I grew up with, like I said, they lived with us. I was away in school and like college and work and stuff, and I wasn't there for either one of their passing or along that time. So that always hit hard. It was always like, and it's not to say that I'm not the best with news, but I'm always doing my thing, right? Like I'm always hyper focused on where I'm at in that time of my life, whether that was living 5 hours away and like really just grinding, working 7 days a week, or whether I'm in grad school, just like studying and things. But it's always like, and my folks know this, to like, don't distract him, like, let him do his thing. He will understand, he will do what he needs to, he'll come home, all that stuff. But it's always like, I don't want to say somewhat blindsided sometimes, but it's always like, I don't know, it's heavy, right? Like I didn't see them, you know? Does that
Now,
make sense?
it did. Your grandparents, are those your mom's parents, your dad's parents?
My mom's parents. I unfortunately never met my father's parents.
Yeah. And so give us a timeline if you can. When did you lose them?
My grandfather, I think I was a senior in college, or was I in grad school at the time? So the timelines blend, but I remember it was like right after my birthday.
Mm,
Um, and then my grandmother, I was living in Erie, Pennsylvania. I think I was finishing up grad school. Um, and that was unexpected for everybody. So I just remember like I was at work and my mom gave me a call and I just sat in my office and just cried. I do remember that. Yeah.
look looking back, throughout your life and childhood, especially growing up with them, were there lessons that they taught you that you remember and look back on and think, "Man, I'm so glad that they were there to teach me or show me this thing?"
So my grandmother always had, because again, I was always in trouble. My grandmother always had faith. So she'd always tell me how she's always praying for me and always doing the tasks she needed um, to keep me safe and keep my well being. So like to me, it's always been, I'm not the most religious, but it's not to say it's not like I'm ignoring it, but it's always like, there's always, you can just keep going, right? Like you're always going to get to the other side of it, whether you're looking for faith, whether you're looking for hope, whether you're looking to just put your head down and keep trucking. Like there's always a way through it. So you got to keep that in mind.
Mm.
And then on my grandfather's side, he's always been also on the side of like serious work ethic. Like if you're going to do it right, do it the first time. He was the first person to teach me measure twice, cut once, right? Like if you're going to do it, make it efficient, make it where you need to. Um, and like even throughout my whole life, there's this one memory that I've always had where he's just like, he started having arthritis in his hands and he would sit there with a notebook and practice his signature over and over and over again. And it was just like, again, if you're going to do it right. If I have to sign something, what he's not even working at the time, what does he have to sign? But he's practicing his name over and over again. So it's again, like you always make it through. And if you do something as efficient as you can and as skilled as you can at that time, you're going to make it to where you need to go.
Those are great lessons. If you could give a message to your grandparents and they were somehow listening to this one, what would you say to them?
Of course, just thank you. Right. Like that'd be the biggest thing. It'd probably be the only thing because the rest is all just not fluff, but thank you for sure.
Mm. And is there anything that you learned about relationships, about life, about how you spend your time and where you place your attention through those 2 losses that you now carry with you today? And maybe an easier, more straightforward way to ask that question is would you do anything differently if you could go back to those seasons of life?
I don't really know. I don't necessarily think so. I mean, maybe I would have just like come home somewhat sooner, but I don't think so. Right. Like I was where I needed to be and they knew that and they wanted me to be there. So I don't necessarily know if I would change anything, but it's because again, they're both very giving and very hardworking people, both of them. So the fact, like they respect hard work, they respect the grind, they respect giving to others because they would. I mean, my grandfather for years drove the bus for our church's youth group, right? Like my grandmother also was like in charge of the youth group and things like, and you hear these stories growing up from people like my parents' age who knew them like when they were always giving and always doing. So it's always been like, how can they create smiles? How can they be supportive and giving through what they enjoy and through what they take seriously? So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but that's something in which I always, again, try to do maybe in a different light, but I definitely kind of do the same stuff
Yeah.
or try
But
to.
it makes sense, and, they sound like incredible people, and
Yeah,
it sounds like you got a lot of them in you, and I appreciate you talking about that.
of course. It's been a while since I talked about it. I didn't anticipate that one.
Yeah, sorry if I caught you off guard.
No, you're good. You're good. That's the
Um,
point of these.
yeah, so with that being said, that was a hard time of life that you did not get to choose. On the flip side, what is the hardest thing that you've done on purpose, and why have you chosen to do that thing? And if you have multiple answers, feel free to throw them out there.
Well, there's gonna be two obvious ones. One was grad school. I did never anticipated ever going to grad school. I came in as a freshman and said, "Nope, I'm doing 4 years. I'm in and out." I've said this from the jump. I said it to my advisor when I was planning out all my classes. Athletic training at the time was only an undergraduate degree, so I was like, "I'm coming in for 4 years. I'm leaving in 4 years." And then by the time I was a senior, I was like, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but also like, "Holy crap, I'm so unprepared. What do I know how to do? Is be a student." So then I went to grad school. Um, a whole nother torturous endeavor, but it was worth it in the long run. Thank God, actually. And then the next thing on the physicality aspect was last man standing in September. That was definitely the largest challenge I've ever given myself outside of any sort of wheelhouse.
Mm. All right, let's talk about grad school first. So, when you got to the end of undergrad, it sounds like there was this feeling of being an imposter, not
Oh
knowing
yeah,
maybe how to move forward other than to continue being a student. Were you unsure of grad school at that time?
still yeah, because it was like I definitely I liked learning, right? Like I knew it would get me further, but then it's also like, what do I do after grad school? What if this happens again? Do I want to go to get a doctorate in something I don't even want just to be safe? Like what does it look like? Because I also got into luckily I got into an accelerated program at Gannon University for exercise physiology. So instead of the 2 years in grad school, it was just a one straight year. Like I literally graduated on Sunday, drove to Erie, Pennsylvania, and was in class Monday morning the next day. So like that was definitely wild, which I didn't know if that would come back again or not.
And so at the end of grad school, did you feel like you knew what you wanted to do, or were you still unsure?
No, somewhat unsure because again, coming out of undergrad, I wanted to be an athletic trainer and like a strength coach, like in a high school and a college, like try to blend and bridge that gap. Went to grad school and ended up loving working with general population and yes, working with athletes, but more on just like the strength conditioning aspect and nothing to do with athletic training.
Mm.
And then when I left grad school, it was kind of like I was like this. My internship turned into a job, luckily, at the facility which I was at. So that was really cool. But again, it was just like, do I want to stay here? Do I not want to stay here? Where do I want to actually end up and go?
Mm.
Um, and that's what led me all over the place after that.
And so I want to keep this at a high level, but one of the things you did not mention in a direct way as the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose is being an entrepreneur and running a business. And I think that's one of the hardest things that I've ever done. So I'm curious your take on that and what have been some of the more challenging moments and pieces of being an entrepreneur and running your own business? And what have been some of the most rewarding parts of that?
Obvious answer: taxes. I had to.
Yeah.
I couldn't help myself. No, but seriously, I didn't know jack shit about business, finance, any of it. I didn't take any of those classes in grad school. I didn't have any text. I didn't have any familiarity with it. I just said, screw it, let's rock and roll. Started reading some books that I know other people read. I lied though. I didn't read. I don't have time to read. So I Audible. I listen to it while I drive. Um, so that's probably the hardest part about being an entrepreneur is just not knowing what to do. Like zero background, just trying to figure it out. Um, Taking a lot of mental notes from people in which I've worked with, a lot of mental notes on they've what were their errors and how could I try to avoid those. Um, that's been a fun challenge, and probably the most rewarding thing is being able to like it's probably like a double edged sword though. So it's rewarding in the aspect that I can just do what I want, kind of, right? Like I can just be in charge of my schedule, give or take. But then on the flip side of that is also like, yo, it is all on me. Like if it doesn't get done, it doesn't get done. Like if I don't do this, I don't get paid. Like if I don't do this, bills don't get paid. Like it is entirely my responsibility for all of my finances and all of my shortcomings and successes, right? Like it's a big weight to bear. Then depending on the day, I like it or don't like it.
That is so true, and, I've got an anecdote and then a quote. So, when I left my full-time job about 2.5 years ago at this point, I was so looking forward to that first day of freedom. I put in my 4 weeks notice, I counted down the days, that final weekend came, and I sat down at my desk in our old apartment on a Monday morning, just so pumped to do whatever I wanted. Nobody was gonna tell me what to do. And I think I sat there for a good hour and a half, 2 hours, just frozen, paralyzed.
Yeah.
I think I spent the day researching business bank accounts, for maybe 3 or 4 hours. I ended up not making a decision, and then I went to the grocery store in the afternoon, and felt so out of place. I was like I think it was Target, actually, and I was like, "Who is at Target at 3 o'clock in the afternoon?" And it was I was that person now. I was the person in Target at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I ended that day and didn't get anything done. I don't even think I bought anything at the store. I didn't pick a business bank account, and I felt so overwhelmed. And I sat down and I wrote a blog about it because to me, that's so therapeutic to write about how I was feeling. And it's such an overwhelming feeling at times, knowing that it's all on you and sometimes not even knowing where to start. But to your point, on those days where things are clicking and you are a bit busier and you have some good sessions and the money is coming and the answers are easy, right? It's the best thing in the world. And there's this quote from Nassim Taleb who said, "The world is split between those who don't know how to start making money and those who don't know when to stop." And I feel like entrepreneurship for me was switching from not knowing how to make money to now not knowing when to stop. And I'm not saying that as if I'm just raking it in so much that
Yeah.
I don't know when to stop, but there's this switch that flips where you realize that there's so much opportunity out there and you can work as hard as you want. And the harder you work, the more you get rewarded, to a certain extent. And I have trouble with the off switch. And I'm curious for you if you have trouble with the off switch, if you don't know when to stop or how to stop, whether that's on a given day, in a given week, or just in general.
And I've gotten much better at the off switch now. Um, Not totally to the fault of my own. I can definitely thank Hannah, my girlfriend, for that one, for actually wanting to spend time with me, right? Because yeah, the off switch was definitely hard because there was prior to the pandemic, and then yes, the pandemic's like an asterisk in everyone's timeline. But then like even afterwards, like 7 days a week, 3 to sometimes 5 jobs, right? Like, or at least roles in making money of some kind. Like go, 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 like burnout. I'm not even like falling asleep. I'm literally crashing and then like zombie walking out of bed. So there's been a lot of those days to where like now, and it's funny, I have actually made, I'd like to make a schedule for people to know where I'm at because I've always been all over the place. And now this time I was really able to, the last iteration of my schedule, I was actually able to tell people to like fuck off on Sundays. Like I'll work Monday to Saturday for X amount of hours, but like Sunday I am now like off. Like I'll see messages come through and like sometimes Hannah will see me like look at my phone and I'm just like, and I like put it down. Like I'll answer you at 3:30 in the morning when I wake up on Monday, but like on Sunday you're not getting an answer from me. It's taken me, I don't know, since like 2019, let's say. So it's taken me a few years.
I'm a year or 2 behind you there, but, I'm the same way, right? If you text me at 8:30 PM, expect a response at 3:30 AM,
Yep.
and I've got no problem with it, right? If you better have do not disturb on because my message is coming through at 3:30
Yes.
anyway.
Agreed.
And I need to do a better job with, uh, putting the phone down and setting that boundary, and it's so, so hard because I can tell myself that's gonna be the case, and I can put the phone down, and just out of habit, I'll glance at it, and
Ah,
as soon as I open the phone, it's like this portal has been opened and I'm sucked back in, and it's nothing destructive, it's nothing terrible, but I'm responding to messages, and That's a work in progress for me. So hearing that you've been able to overcome that or are in the process of continuing to overcome that is helpful for someone like myself.
Oh, dude, by no stretch of the imagination was it easy, right? Like we all come same exact thing we fall victim to. Like I'll be cleaning the dishes like after dinner and like I'm done and I just see something open on my phone. The next thing I know, I'm just leaning on the kitchen counter and like 10 minutes have gone by and Hannah's like in the other room, like, hey Joe, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, ah, sorry. But it's also like I'm client facing, right? And I'm sure you are like, or we're on a call, right? Like right now, for example, we have an hour without looking at my phone. Like, I don't want to say we're not productive, but we're not like attentive to anything that requires our attention via our phone or email or messages, what have you. So I try to play catch up on that. And then when I play catch up, I lead down another rabbit hole. What I've actually done now too, which also hopefully might be helpful for you. Every day I have an alarm that goes off at 8:30 p.m. and it tells me vitamins and teeth. So what that means is at 8:30, I mean, granted, sometimes I'm still eating dinner, but at 8:30, then I put my phone down. I go to the kitchen, I take my vitamins every night, I start brushing my teeth, and hopefully I'm in bed by 9 and I'm
Mhm.
starting like that evening routine. Um, and sometimes, like, I'll go to plug my phone in when I'm going to bed to, like, charge it, and, like, I'll see something, I might, like, get back into it, but at least it creates the process of me, like, going to bed.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's helpful for anyone out there.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, if not just for me. But one other question, and this is a bit selfish on my end, hopefully it helps somebody else out there, and it's a look into just what entrepreneurship is. What's your relationship with your phone while you are working out, when your fitness is happening?
Wow, okay. Yeah, well, you're giving me a good one. So it depends on if I need content or not, which to you, like, you're always getting content, dude, you're pumping so much out, it's impressive. It makes me, like, literally tell other people, like, "How does he do it?" Because like, when I'll do it, I'll film it and then be like, "Alright, I got it. That's not that great. I'll film it on the next set." Like, I'll make do with it. And then, like, sometimes when I'm doing that, like, I'll sit there and then watch it. And, like, granted, yes, I'm supposed to rest between my sets, but then I'll get a little nitpicky in it, and then while I'm doing that, something will pop up, right? Something will pop up, like, notifications are always going off. So, like, I've tried to now set a timer for my rest as well. Like, granted, yes, it's like, all right, we'll take 2 minutes rest. I'll sit there and answer some DMs, but it's like, no, no, like set that deliberate timer because I'm trying not to be on my phone while I'm working out, but it just inevitably happens. So at least if I know that timer goes off, it's like even if I'm mid like sentence, I'll at least just lock my phone and leave it there because it'll be there when I come back.
Yeah.
Do my set and then like come back. Um, if I'm filming, it's definitely more distracting than not.
Mhm.
But lately, since I've been on such a tight schedule and I really only have 60 minutes to work out between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m., like it's none of that. It's like I'll put like my headphones actually in and I'll leave my phone with my water bottle on the water fountain and I'll just like, cool, set a timer. And I know no one's texting me at that point in the day, thank God. And then I put it right back down and then keep going. So recently it's been better, but historically it's been a shit show.
I think that's a great point, especially when you said it'll be there when I get back, because it's a good reminder for me that there's a big difference between something that's important and something that's urgent, or rather, something that's important and something that feels urgent. I think a lot of times the notifications that come through on my phone, I'm sure this applies for other people, they feel urgent. It feels like we need to get back to people, especially if we're client facing or you're an entrepreneur, but the truth is, it'll be there when you get back. And if it's 5 minutes versus 2 hours, right? I'm sure it can't be that urgent that that person needs the answer right at that moment. And there's a difference between something being important, like an in person relationship or a close, intimate relationship, spending time with your significant other, and urgent or seemingly urgent, like getting back to somebody who texts you at 8 o'clock at night. And that's a reminder that I need. I'm speaking to myself right now. So
Yeah, of course. It'll always be there.
mm,
Granted, you can still preview the message, but I also have I don't know if it helps you, I have my read receipts on, which I don't know if you figured out by now. So, like, I'm big on the preview of the message because then when I go to actually open the message, I'm going to respond, right?
yeah.
I'm not gonna let it sit there for a while.
Yeah, that's something I do as well. Read receipts aren't on, I don't believe, but every time I open a message, I'll respond to it, and that's been a strategy that I've used for a long time now. And I'm the type of person who can't have an unread email in their inbox without it bothering me, so I've got to get
Yep.
rid of it. You know?
Yeah, dude. There. You should see my email with the folders and subfolders. Everything is like if something comes through, it either gets deleted or gets fucked or put where it needs to immediately, and of course responded to. Right. So
Mhm.
I get that. There's no notifications going unnoticed on my phone.
I love that. And so, all right, we just spoke about grad school into entrepreneurship as one of the hardest things you've ever chosen to do. On the other side of things, you mentioned the last man standing. So, first, I would love to know why you signed up for that. And then I want to hear about the experience.
Okay. The why I signed up for it. So as you know, as we dive further in our communities, right? Like our communities have overlapped in the past few years, which is awesome. And there's a lot of I don't want to say like trends within the fitness community, right? But there's challenges, right? And it's like, ooh, I like that challenge too. Let me try that, right? As you know, Kieran Williams, like the man, the myth, the legend he is, like all of the ultra marathons he's done so far, I've helped him on one of them at least. I almost got him DQ'd on one, so I'm sorry for that. We didn't. Neither one of us knew there was no pacers, and I went there and just ran a few laps with him. And then the dude was just like, "If you do another one, he's DQ'd." I'm like, "Oh, done. Untie my shoes. Done." Um, so like he got in my ear way back in January. He's like, "Dude, there's this race that's like opened up if you want to do it." And I was like, "What is it?" And he told me about like I knew what the backyard ultra marathons were. For those of you who don't know, it's a 4.2 mile lap, and you have to do it in an hour within an hour because every lap starts at the top of the hour. And if you don't finish, you're obviously disqualified. And if you don't start, you're disqualified. And there's only ever one winner. So to me, it was like, that's a good entry point for a few reasons. I'm not going to get lost in the woods. I'm going to always make sure that I have like every hour, I'm going to get to my aid station, right? Like I'm going to be able to be supplied and everything like that. But then two, I can really go as far as I can. It's not that I'm going to do 100 miles and potentially not finish, right? Everybody gets DQ'd. There's only one winner in the backyard ultra, or sometimes no winner. So to me, it was like I can make it as far as I can, but then I can just do one more, right? I can get as far as I possibly can, and then if I don't finish the last lap, like it is what it is. I didn't. Everyone lost, so like cool. Let's see how far I can push it, because then now that gives me like a barrier of entry, right? So now it's like cool. I did 36 miles, I think it was, a little over 50K, I think. And then now it's like, cool, how do I get to that next mark? Right? Like, how do I get so I ran just shy of 8 hours? How can I get to that 12-hour mark? Right? Like, how can I keep potentially going in that aspect? Or how can I take that skill to something else? Because I knew from reading a lot about running and other books like along entrepreneurship, like it seems like there is a endurance world and entrepreneurship world that work together a lot, and all these people doing Ironmans and hard races and things. And it's been like, we need to spend more time in my own brain. So that's
Mhm.
how I can also spend time in my own brain.
Were there any limiting thoughts that popped into your mind throughout the race, such as, "Hey, I'll stop after lap 5 because I've done enough," or, "Hey, this is uncomfortable, I don't need to be here." What was popping up for you?
A lot of the time, it was with the schedule in which I have, it's led to training limitations. Like there's some times where I didn't hit my weekly miles. There's times where I wasn't able to get on the trail, and I did a lot of road running, unfortunately, or however you look at it. There was just a lot of like unknowns as well too, because it's like I have zero clue how to fuel for this. For context, folks, this is the longest and probably only running race I've ever done. I've lifted weights and laughed at running and laughed at cardio up until like 2 years ago. So this was very new and very outside of my scope. So I didn't even know what gels were, what they tasted like. I didn't know what food I needed in between my laps. So there was so many unknowns to where it was just like, holy crap, I'm incredibly unprepared as I'm wandering through Walmart the day before trying to find what I want versus like, this is all learning, right? It was kind of like a back and forth, back and forth. And as I started to miss my paces, so like on lap 7, they have mile markers, right? So like I was a pretty consistent pace for 6 laps, like clocking every mile where I needed to. Then on the 7th one, I started slowing down, and I started like, oh shit, like I don't know if I'm gonna actually make this part. And then it's like, why am I not gonna make it? Like, is it is it my shoes? Do I need to change my socks? Is it the fuel? And I'm just like, and it took me a second. It's like, dude, this is just hard, man. Like you just checked off all the boxes you've never hit before. And then on the eighth lap, I told him I like kind of knew it was gonna be my last one based on my time because I was cutting it close. And I just kept crying that eighth lap, as weird as that sounds. Like I wasn't sad about it, but I couldn't control it either. It was kind of like a now I'm by myself. I'm not with a group of dudes that I was doing this with. Because there was like a group of like 6 to 8 of us that were pretty much together the entire race, which I'm incredibly grateful for because they got me where I was. So on the eighth lap, I was pretty much all alone after that last mile or the first mile. And then from there, I was just like, dude, you are doing this. Like, you're going to do this. Like, that's awesome. I'm going to hit like 50K at the end. And I remember the last like quarter mile, like I just walked. I just like took it all in, walked. Some dude like yelling at me to get to the finish line. I'm like, dude, I'm good. I have 2 minutes. I'm gonna make it there. You keep running, and I just like took it all in, and like as soon as I crossed the line, I just like everyone was to the left of the finish, and I just went to the right and like sat behind a truck and then just cried. It was super cool, but I also had zero control.
Hmm. What do you think
Yeah,
the tears were for? Why the crying?
I don't know. I'm not one to. I'm not good with emotions, and I'm not very good at understanding how I feel. A lot of the times, I just kind of keep going. Um, and sometimes like tonight they just come, right? Like I don't really
Hmm.
expect them to. Um, and that was really it. Like I was just like, I guess grateful, happy, accomplished. I don't really know. It was just like, wow, I did something super hard.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think
I think
do
that was
you
really it.
do you think you were proud of yourself in that moment? Or obviously you were proud of yourself, but do you think the pride was a reason potentially?
Probably. I would probably say that's probably because it's definitely the hardest thing I've ever signed up for. So I think probably it was just overwhelming of like, yes, I feel like physical shit. But also like I didn't die. I didn't
Mm.
break. I didn't get hurt. That was another thing too. This is probably the first new thing I did where I didn't get hurt. Like the cross, numerous injuries, rock climbing, injuries, snowboarding, injuries. Like this was the first thing that just like sucked, but I was still like succeeded at the same time, if that makes sense.
It does. And just to go back to the tears, this past week, I was out in Utah helping to lead a retreat. And before that retreat, from the ages of, let's say, 18 to 29 currently, I think I've cried maybe 5 times. So I could count on one hand. And
Yeah.
all those times where they were pretty significant, right? Like a lot of tears, very emotional for various reasons, but 5 times. That retreat weekend, I think I cried 4 or 5 times just in a
Wow.
week in a weekend. Um, and it was similar to what you said, where I didn't know really why they were coming, but they were. And it was very cathartic. It felt like it was needed. And I didn't know that it was needed until it happened. And there was this one moment where I was watching another grown man cry while doing breath work. I had my eyes open because I was helping to lead, but he was on the
Yeah.
ground, eyes covered, just bawling. And watching that happen just triggered something inside of me that just brought tears, and I couldn't control it, and it was almost like I saw this other human being who looked so tough and strong on the outside, just totally breaking down, and it just broke something inside of me, not in a bad way, but I felt for him,
Yeah.
and I share all this just because I appreciate the tears. I think honestly, I think we need more of it. I'm not saying we should go, seek out reasons to cry,
Yeah.
every day or every week, but I think when they come, we should embrace them. And I appreciate you just, yeah, being vulnerable about that. Thank you.
Of course, man. And there's something to be said too about like recognizing that they're coming, right? Like you said this weekend, like I've done group breath work many times, and the environment is incredibly impactful, right? Like you feel this sense of like connection like you've never had, but also disconnect from like consciousness at the same time. So like not totally surprised by hearing your reaction to that because it's like, and I can only imagine because the event looked amazing. So like you guys in a tent out there, like grounding, right? Like doing all these things. Like I can only imagine the sense of connecting that you felt with everyone in that tent other than just that man.
Yeah, it's special when you can be in an environment where you're out of your normal routine, you're around other people who are also looking for a similar experience. And to have that was a gift. And I would recommend to anybody listening, if you are on the fence about an event or an experience or something along those lines where you can get out of your comfort zone around other people who want to grow and who want to learn and want to connect, I would say go for it because it really it was special for me, and it sounds like you've had similar experiences. Um,
Oh,
so
tremendous. And agreed. I couldn't recommend more. Like definitely do stuff outside your comfort zone as best as you can or as often as you can.
yeah, and so with that being said, Joe, the last man standing required endurance, and I'm wondering for you when you hear the word endure, what does that mean to you?
It I mean, I said the same thing when we did the your thing in Philly in April, which by the way, next one in April is already on the calendar.
Nice.
Um, it to me it brings community because you can't do any of that alone. You can't like not even just the event itself, right? Like the whole training aspect. Like I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't have Hannah helping me, right? Like within the training process, I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for the clients that I like had to maneuver around my training blocks as best as I could. Like I couldn't do it without like Anna Olson, perfect example. Like she sent me over a running program, and her and I sat in coffee shops before she moved when she still lived in New Jersey about like a game plan on how to approach this and balance my strength training. Like the amount of connections and support you need to be able to endure anything is I don't know if people would necessarily ignore it, but I feel like it's undervalued because I wouldn't be able to actually do that. I wouldn't have been able to even if I wasn't as prepared, but I wouldn't be as prepared as I was without that community and without that connection to those people. So to endure anything requires a community, and you wouldn't have been able to find that thing you had to endure without that community to begin with. So it's that's where my head goes when I think of that word.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are self-made in the sense that we do everything all by ourselves. I think it's far from that. I mean, even to be on this podcast, I needed all of the people that went into making this microphone, this computer, these headphones,
Yeah.
whoever out there invented the internet. I have no idea who that is, all right? We wouldn't be here without that. And so, yeah, and I can relate on a deep level to just the appreciation and gratitude for clients who are willing to support us in our goals and move things around and be flexible. And those people mean so much. And I'll just highlight two people you mentioned: Anna Olson, episode 66 of this podcast; Kieran Williams, episode 20 of this podcast. Two phenomenal human beings who would go out of their way to go, support people like you, people like me, and people within this community. So it is truly about all of us together and what we can do together. I agree.
Yeah. Tremendous.
So with that being said, Joe, we're going to transition to the last question of the podcast, which is my favorite because everybody listening to this is at a different place in life, going through different things. But beneath the surface, I do believe that everybody is struggling with something. Some might be big, some might be small, some might be seen, some might be hidden. But people need encouragement. And I don't think that we can ever get too much encouragement, too much guidance, too much support. So if somebody out there listening is going through a hard time, a tough season, they don't know what to do or where to turn, and they get to listen to you for a few minutes, what would you say to that person?
Fuck yeah. That's what I would say. That is, and I don't mean that like lighthearted. Like I say that all. If you know me, that's like my catchphrase. But like if you're going through something, like fuck yeah, man. Like own it. Like yes, it might suck, but like as lame as it sounds, like adapt and overcome. Like you're gonna get through this. If there's, and I know it's probably a cliche. I know people say it all the time, but like use it as a lesson. Like just like everything else. Like you're you're gonna make it through. It's gonna suck. you might have to go through that at this particular moment, but the grass is only greener where you water it, right? Like I know I just threw out a bunch of cliches at you, but it's like it's the truth, man. Just like own where you're at, accept it, think about it if you need to, or don't think, just keep on throwing punches, and you're going to get to where you want to be anyway.
I love that. Give me your catchphrase one more time, Joe.
Fuck yeah.
I love it.
Sorry if you have to bleep all these curses out. I don't.
No, man. Sam Tooley, who you and I also know very well, was episode 2 of this podcast. He was actually the first guest because I did episode 1 solo. And so
Yeah.
when I sat down to kind of start this podcast, actually 2 years ago, almost to date,
Wow.
yeah, I know it's been a wild ride. I rated this as clean on Apple and Spotify and all the platforms. And then the next day I had Sam on, and 10 seconds into the podcast, I had to throw that out the window. So we are explicit.
Okay, cool.
We're good. So Joe, let me ask you this. If people want to find out more about what you have going on, if they want to connect, if they want to follow along, where should people do that?
The best spot is like Instagram. I don't use anything else because it takes too much time and focus and energy. So you can find me at Sully's Training Systems, underscore between each word, and I'll pop up.
I
It's
love
a little
that.
bit of an outdated photo. My mullet was a little longer during that photo shoot, I'll be honest, but it's still me, I promise.
I had to do quite a bit of searching to find a cover photo for this episode. I've got it, by the way. It's a great picture.
Okay.
It's from this year's Project Endure event. You look amazing. But there's a quote that I want to share before we wrap up. And this
Yeah.
is a quote that made me think of you, especially based on what you said at the beginning of this episode. So it's from Zig Ziglar, who said, "You can have everything you want in life if you just help enough people get what they want in life." And I feel like pursuing service and pursuing meaningful service and relationship is an amazing way to get to where you want to be in life. And I see you doing that, and I see you putting other people first. And so I just wanted to highlight that. And I just wanted to thank you because you inspire me every day, man. I mean that.
Thank you, man. I love that. And I mean, also a big fan of Zig Ziglar. So thank you for that one.
Of course, dude. Well, thank you for this. Can't wait to catch up soon in person. And I know this one's going to be a big hit.
Oh, yeah, man. I'll see you soon for sure.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Endure podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Endure Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.